Hey there everyone, welcome back to Press for Truth TV. Today is Friday, May the 11th, 2012, and we've had a lot of things going on in the news this week. For those of you who caught my video upload from a couple days ago, you'll recall that I was talking a little bit about the new so-called underwear bomber who turned out was a double agent working for the CIA. He was a CIA informant, and that information came out. It was exposed that he was working for the CIA. And the interesting thing that I pointed out in that video was how I was watching a newscast that day that was using that case as an example to show why it is so important that people have to go through these body scanners at the airports, these X-ray machines that take a image of your naked body. The program was stating how it's necessary to do so because of these types of terrorist attacks that people are trying to carry out, which of course is completely fabricated because this was the work of the CIA all along. However, today I came across an article that's very interesting, especially just in the last few days. A lot of the news stations all over the world have been saying how important these machines are. Well, here's an article I wanted to show you from Huffington Post that came out. The title is "Naked Scanners Being Pushed on Travelers Even Though Canada's Government Hasn't Tested Them." Canadian airport security officers are pushing travelers to use naked scanners that were not independently tested and are now tied to documented cases of severe headaches and at least one unexplained radiation burn. Ottawa says it assessed the manufacturer's information but didn't conduct its own test on the machines. The manufacturer says that the scanners are safe and are independently tested by purchasing governments, though that hasn't happened in Canada or the United States. Passenger complaints obtained by the Huffington Post Canada suggest security screeners repeatedly breached protocol by forcing passengers, including children, pregnant women, and those with illnesses, to enter full-body scanners rather than perform the requested pat-downs. Screeners also failed in a number of cases to inform travelers that they could opt out for a pat-down instead. And that is an important note to make, that you do have the option of opting out of this thing. If you are selected for pre-screening, you do have the right to say, I don't want to walk through that machine. Number one, it's been proven to not be safe. There's been no testing to show that it is safe. And number two, it's a complete violation of basic fundamental privacy rights. It amounts to a virtual strip search. So people should not have to be subjected to a virtual strip search when they're have never done anything wrong. So it's important to always remember that you do have the option. Unfortunately, the option, if you don't go through the body scanner, is the invasive pat down from the TSA, where they basically grope you, and it's a very intrusive and invasive pat down. As I've seen, a lot of footage have come out of people in a lot of distress as they're getting groped by the TSA. But you do have that option. You don't have to walk through the X-ray machines. So we'll continue on this article here. The Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, the agency that employs the men and women who screen passengers and carry-on bags, insists that the full-body scanners are safe. But complaint forms released under the Access to Information Act suggest some travelers experience serious side effects after going through the so-called virtual strip machines. One passenger says here, "As soon as I stepped into the scanner, I immediately began feeling sick. I looked at the agent to my left for instructions, and just moving my head made me very dizzy. As I stepped out of the scanner, I was very dizzy and sick to my stomach. I noticed the agent, and she called for a supervisor. I could barely stand," wrote one passenger flying from Regina to Calgary. And now I'll just skip ahead a little bit here. It's a long article. I'll put a link in the description so you can check it out for yourself. But here you'll see where there was another gentleman who claimed that he received radiation burns from being in one of these machines. And it says here, at least one person has sent me a burn on their leg and said that it came from the X-ray machine. The guy sent me a copy of a pathology report, and the report is a legitimate radiation burn. You don't get radiation burns from nothing. I don't reconcile how this could have happened. It doesn't make sense, but who knows how these machines are put together? We have no data. How are they generated? There's a lot of technology. Possibly that maybe the machine puts out x-rays that are never tested. I don't know. In principle, the scanners are safe, but in practice, I don't know. And again, I'll put a link to this article in the description so you can check it out for yourself. But people are beginning to call out the fact that these things are not safe. And we know that they have to keep up this idea of terrorism is out there to get you. And that's why we need these things. Which brings us to our next story of some things that have been going on here in Canada, in Montreal, in the last few days. There was a coordinated smoke bomb attack in the metro systems in Montreal, shutting down their subway systems at the peak rush hour from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. Just a few days ago. And a new article has just come out linking the so-called attack to some of the student protesters. Here is an article from local news in Montreal. Suspects identified in smoke bomb attacks. A sociology student, a sexology student, and a geography student from the University of Quebec at Montreal have been identified as suspects in yesterday's smoke bomb attacks in the metro system. La Presse this morning says the trio, 2 women and a man, are among 4 people that Montreal police have identified as suspects. They were recognized by arson squad investigators who have viewed security camera footage. The newspaper says they are all members of a more radical faction of the Class Student Union, which is already considered the most militant of the 3 student unions involved in the tuition protest. It's not known if they have met with police investigators. Police are still looking for a 4th male suspect. And I would more liken this to, some young punk pranksters. I mean, I've seen other reports calling this domestic terrorism, and I think that is certainly a stretch. This kind of a prank or this kind of a thing reminds me of when kids used to throw cherry bombs in the toilets at schools just to make the water splash up. No doubt this is a bad thing that these kids did, but to refer to it as domestic terrorism, I think is certainly a bit of a stretch. Especially as we see how they're dishing out these more draconian laws to deal with so-called terrorists, and which brings us to our latest thing in regards to bills being introduced with how to deal with these student protesters. Check this out. You'll recall just a few days ago when I interviewed Eric Bouchette from Montreal, I brought up to him the fact that they want to introduce a bill that would make it illegal to wear a mask at these protests. Well, they've just announced that the penalty for doing so could land you 10 years in jail. Here's an article from CBC. Mask ban will permanently double to 10 years. MPs studying a bill that would make it illegal for rioters to cover their faces have doubled the proposed penalty to 10 years. Conservative MPs on the House Justice Committee changed the proposed law Thursday, sending the legislation back to the House of Commons with a maximum penalty of 10 years in jail rather than 5. The committee was studying Bill C-309, a proposed law that would make it a crime for people rioting or at an unlawful protest to conceal their identities. And as you'll recall in my conversation with Eric Bouchette of Montreal, I mentioned how, me personally, I would not choose to wear a mask or to hide my face at a protest. I have certain issues with that, in particular with groups like Anonymous or Black Bloc. It's just that there's so much room for infiltration, especially by the police when you're able to conceal your faces. So it's something that I don't choose to engage in. However, I do know there's a number of people who go to these events who are not going to have no intent on engaging in any criminal activity. They simply want to be able to protect themselves from the chemical weapons, uh, pepper spray and tear gas, but they also want to protect themselves from the facial recognition cameras. So I agree with the right to be able to, when you go to these protests and these types of events, to protect yourself from the chemical weapons and the recognition systems. But if this bill passes now, they are saying it could land you up to 10 years in jail just for wearing a mask. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if this actually amounts to any charges being laid. If these protesters wearing a mask were faced with 10 years in jail, I think some Canadian lawyers here would be all over it, and I'd be pretty surprised to see somebody getting convicted of that. But lo and behold, it's on the table. They're bringing it to the House of Commons. They want to vote on this, and it's ridiculous that for a protest wearing a mask, they want to put you away for 10 years. And anyways, guys, speaking of protests, you'll recall that yesterday I mentioned Occupy Bilderberg protests coming up at the end of the month. And I've really been thinking about it lately, and I want to go. I really, really want to go to Chantilly, Virginia to cover this important event. Bilderberg, these guys are pretty much the peak of the pyramid. We're talking about the elite of the elite. Some of the puppet string pullers who are really shaping the direction of this world. But I'm not going to be able to do it without your help. So today, I'm asking for a little bit of help from the supporters. I'm going to put out a video next week to YouTube and also ask for support. But at pressfortruth.ca, I've set up what's called a chip-in widget, an area where you can contribute. We're trying to raise enough funds to bring me and Steve out to Chantilly, Virginia from May 30th to June 4th so that we can be there for the entire duration of the Bilderberg Conference and provide coverage of that event to people in Canada and people all over the world. But again, we're going to need some help. We're going to need some funding, basically. And I hate asking for things. You'll notice I never ask for donations. In fact, back when I set up pressfortruth.tv, it's because I didn't want to just ask for donations. I want to provide a service on a daily basis. And that's what I've been doing. But for this particular trip, we are going to need some extra help. So I would ask you today to check out the link. I'll put a link in the description at pressfortruth.ca. There's the little chip-in area, and if you click on that, you can make a contribution, and your contribution will certainly be greatly, greatly appreciated because I think this is an incredibly important event to cover. But we're going to need the help and support from you, the viewers. So anyways, guys, that's it for today. Check out the links in the description. If you are able to contribute, if you can show your support in that way, it will be greatly appreciated. And that's it. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll see you all right back here on Monday. Take care.